Well, everybody knows that college can be pretty stressful. The all-night partying, the sleeping till 2 in the afternoon, watching football games, hanging out with your friends, playing Risk when you should be studying, all of that eventually adds up to the point where, it's more than an adult can take. So some good news for those of you out there in college. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the latest single milestone on the slow descent into hell. You'll be pleased to know that for students who may be suffering from emotional anxiety, because God knows it's tough living in American colleges in the early part of the 21st century, that the University of Georgia has stepped forward with an extremely progressive policy, and the progressive policy is this. This is from Campus Reform, and here's the headline. Professor lets student choose own grades for stress reduction. And here are some of the bullet points. University of Georgia professor has adopted a stress reduction policy that will allow students to select their own grades if they feel unduly stressed by the ones that they earned. Similarly, students who feel stressed by group dynamics are allowed to walk away from their groups without explanation and will only be graded on non-group work. Now, the professor acknowledges that this policy might hinder the development of group skills and mastery of the class material, but says that this is each student's own responsibility. So, Steve, now that we live in a world where you not only don't even have to study, you can simply walk to the teacher with your email them and say, this F is, I'm not saying it's unfair, because I didn't come to class. But it does stress me out and reduces my ability to be a fully fledged human being. So I think I'd like to have that changed to an A. What could possibly go wrong, Steve?
Well, really, there's a huge problem with this, Bill. Let me tell you what it is. The professor is putting far too much pressure on these students to justify their pretend A's. Don't you think? Making them explain to him why they feel they should get an A instead of just demanding the A and then getting it.
I think you might be making a case for a generation of adults, but in this case, you're talking about the actual students who've never been denied anything. Whenever they want anything, they get it immediately, and if they don't get it, they have a temper tantrum, and then they get it. These are the people who set fire to their campuses when somebody comes on campus that they don't want to hear speaking. These are the people who really thought that Donald Trump would be impeached, or that they would re-vote the election because it didn't turn out the way that they wanted. So, no, I don't think that they would be overstressed, Steve. I think they'll go in and ask for an A because they all deserve A's.
Okay, well, I agree with Steve, though. I think it is stressful to have to ask, and I don't know why I would have to ask when clearly the professor could see my emotional distress and should just do it for me.
The professor should infer that I require an A to meet my psychological well-being without me having to risk the embarrassment of asking for the A that I didn't earn or deserve.
But let me just follow up with you, Steve, because, as I said, you're making an adult point here. At least you're bringing up something.
Well, that's the first on this show.
The first time for everything. At least you're bringing up a moral dilemma that does not exist for these kids. And the reason that the moral dilemma does not exist for the students is because they've been told that they are A students all their lives, that everything they do is first in the class, and since they've never been allowed to keep score, ever, they have no way of not knowing. They have no way of not knowing that they're really just rather unexceptional.
Yeah. It's let me tell you a true story going back to the fall of 1987. I was a freshman at the University of Missouri-Columbia, Mizzou, which, as you know, is in a death spiral right now because the progressives have taken over the place and enrollment's down, I think, 15 or 20%. They're closing dorms and shrinking departments and all the rest. When I was there in the late 80s, it was about 2-to-1 Republicans and conservatives to Democrats and liberals. At these days, it's probably 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 the other way around, even with their shrunken enrollment. And I was living on 5th floor Hudson dorm, and about 2 doors down, I think the roommates were John and Mike. I was always hanging out in their room because they had the cool beds, up on the platforms, so they had a full floor down below.
Loft, yeah.
Yeah, the loft beds, and they had a carpet, and most importantly, they had two things I didn't have: a TV and a really loud stereo. So I was down at their place all the time, and I was hanging out, and we were watching TV, and I don't remember what we were watching or what was said, but I said something. Well, the kind of thing that I'm liable to say back at the television. And John turns to me and says, "Well, that wasn't very politically correct." And I looked at him. I'd never heard the phrase politically correct before. I was, 18 years old, and this was the 1980s. It hadn't happened yet. And politically correct, what does that mean? And he explained to me, and I believe the next words out of my mouth, having heard what political correctness was, "You have got to be blanking me." And I thought, well, this is never going to go anywhere. People aren't going to just agree to be stupid to one another.
Yes, they will.
Boy, was I wrong.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
Included in the article, Scott, because you can tell that this professor is a man of very deep virtue and who really, really cares more than the other professors. There's one little line in his guidelines for his pick your own grade class that I also found a little bit interesting, and it was this. Only positive comments about presentations will be given in class. Comments designed to improve future presentations will be communicated by email. So what that means is if you do some work in class and it's, well, I hate to say wrong because that's so, it's so archaic, white privilege, racist term.
Cognitive privilege.
You can't even say wrong is wrong because that's judgmental.
That's right. So we're not even going to say anything. We're not even going to say anything negative. You not only get to pick your own grades, but we are only going to have positive comments about whatever work you do, and any negative comments that we may have in order to improve future presentation, they will be communicated by email.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Let me just tee up a question. A better question. What does that do to the human soul?
Well, first of all, I like to point out every little good thing I can find about anybody. And in this case, I am all for the idea that I can walk away from a group of students that I've been forced to participate with because I don't think anything good has ever happened in the education system in the world by groups that are formed. The teacher goes, "Oh, you work," because you know what happens? One or two people in that group does all the work, and the other ones are a constant drag, but get all the credit for the good performance of the real worker. But as far as I can understand, let's say in a work environment, you're encouraged, if you're a good leader, to praise publicly but criticize privately. And the purpose for that is your job isn't to shame your employees, your job is to help to improve them. However, in a classroom setting, what everybody's trying to do is to learn. So you can have a session where you critique something without being personally insulting about it. And you can say, okay, what did you like about that presentation? What do you think, where did you think the presentation strayed from the guidelines that we've talked about, or the principles that we're talking about in this class? And you can do that without being a jerk about it. But the idea that anything that is not just a pat on the back and a hearty well done is somehow demoralizing to people or dehumanizing to people, I think the net result is going to be that no good person is going to ever sign up for that class again. No real achiever, nobody who cares about the subject matter is going to sign up for that class, because people who really strive for excellence want to be challenged. They want to have people say, no, that's not the way to do it. Here's how you have to change to improve. And if nobody ever says that, you never get better. And I think that's the fallacy in all this. You think you're making people better by not exposing them to the shortcomings. What you're doing is you're setting them up for tragic, catastrophic failure later in life.
Sometimes it's interesting to compare models because you can look at small segments of society as a laboratory. So we have the model where no negative comments will be given in public, and you get to choose whatever grade you want. And let's contrast that with the kind of training, let's say, that the SEALs go through in basic underwater demolitions training. I've not gone through that training because I'm not good enough for it. But I have seen it on TV. And my recollection is that negative comments were, in fact, shared in front of everybody else every now and then.
Yes, they were shared.
Yes. So let's talk about what kind of results does this produce, as opposed to the results that we know that come from something like this at the University of Georgia. I suspect what happens in BUD/S is that when you are humiliated in front of your peers, two things happen. First of all, you're humiliated, so you learn some humility. You no longer think that you are the invincible grade A student who's going to sail through everything, that you have serious defects, and these defects must be worked on. And if you want to leave, you can go. We just go ring the bell and you can go. No one's stopping you. But it does something more important than that. It does two things more important than that. First of all, when you are publicly when you have a flaw that's publicly exposed and you work your tail off in order to correct that flaw, that then becomes a point of pride. That is actual self-esteem. That's real self-esteem. That's respecting and admiring yourself for having accomplished something. But I think it's much more interesting on the group level too, because if an individual is picked out and humiliated in front of the group, these idiots on the left think that would make that kid feel inferior and that everybody else would feel superior to him. But that's not how it works. When somebody is singled out for failure, people realize that could have been me. They're more often willing to help the person out. And what it does is it creates a bonding situation. It is a social cohesion mechanism because it's not always the same guy, right? It's virtually always going to be, everybody's going to get that treatment. I'm sure the DIs do this on purpose, and everybody makes enough mistakes so that it's not going to be hard. So everybody gets under the spotlight. Everybody gets their butt chewed. Everybody has to deal with the humiliation of it. And that together forms a bond that puts these men into a family. And of all the things that I think is the most wonderful thing about this specific incident of BUD/S training, and not just BUD/S training, but officer training in general, my favorite part of the whole thing is when the course is complete and you made it, and you come out of the course, if you're an officer, for example, and you finish OCS, when you're finished, the drill sergeant has to salute you and call you sir. And that is a profound moment in anybody's life, because now you know what self-esteem really is. It's not something that was handed to you because everybody gets an A in whatever degree they want. It is you have achieved something of magnificence, and the person who was so hard on you now shows you the respect that you have earned for yourself. So I'm sure they'll be teaching this class at the University of Georgia anytime soon. There are a bunch of crazy lunatics up there anyway. The Florida Gators normally hand them their butts, but in this particular years or two, so just never mind about that. In any event, that's your right angle. That's your right angle on being able to pick your own grade, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. We're getting a lot of reach with these right angle shows, and we're fighting a big headwind with companies like YouTube and Facebook fighting against this content, as you'll see in Steve's episodes this week. So if you want to become a member and basically stick it to them, we'd love to have you over at BillWhittle.com. We'll see you next week.